Of the many new releases we get for 8-bit systems, the one thing we've really not seen much of is new action platform games. Sure, we've had plenty of action games and plenty of platformers, just that we've not had many which bring elements of both together to make something unique. A combination which makes for something quite special in Delta Shadow, a new release from Sanchez Crew for your Spectrum Next. This is Beyond the Scanlines, a series focusing on interesting games on classic computing and gaming platforms. Delta Shadow is set in 2207 and can be considered an unofficial sequel to Taito's Power Blade games released on the NES. Things may be calm in the aftermath of the Delta Foundation's destruction in the second game, but things are about to heat up once again as the alien threat is back, and this time they've taken over the Trigon Corporation, a firm set up for defending humanity and preventing another alien incursion. Which is where you come in, taking the role of Agent Nova, who was responsible for saving humanity from the aliens' prior attacks. The game opens up with a neat intro sequence where Nova is briefed by his partner, Jacqueline, who has been working inside Trigon prior to discovering the secret alien threat. Stopping Trigon and said threat requires Nova to work his way through a series of Trigon facilities. As the game opens up, 3 of them are available, and you're free to pick the order in which you want to tackle them. That being said, it's no surprise to find that there is a natural order to taking them on which really feels best. Each facility is broken up into 3 levels. Your goal is to make your way through each, then set up some explosives to demolish them once you clear the final level. Unsurprisingly, it's no walk in the park, with plenty of opposition between you and the end of each level. Each one is set up as a small maze of sorts. From your starting point, you'll work your way through the map, locating the exit to move on to the next. As you explore, you'll need to battle your way through the various enemy forces. Initially comprised of various robotic defenses, but becoming more alien as you get further and further into the Trigon facilities. Nova's primary method of attack is his boomerang, which, whilst offering limited range, can do plenty of damage to enemies. It can become more effective by collecting upgrade pickups. Collecting enough of these will boost your rate of fire, allowing you to have more shots in the air at a time. Although, only for a limited amount of time, particularly if you fire rapidly, as your weapon power will drain, resulting in you only being able to fire one at a time once again. Pickups aren't just only for improving your weapon power though. You'll find ones which give you additional health, which is incredibly important, along with recharging your suit. Once again, very important. Also situated about the levels are pickups containing messages. These fill you in with background information regarding topics like other characters in the game, the locales you'll be fighting in, various pieces of equipment, and yes, potential threats as well. These offer small tidbits to help flesh out the world, which really helps contribute to moving the story forward, at least in a small enough way. In the first level of each facility, your first objective is to locate the lab, home to the first of the 2 bosses you'll encounter. These confrontations follow in the tradition of many a classic game. Learn the boss's movement patterns, then get in there and do as much damage as possible. As always, it can be tricky to work it out on your first few attempts. At least it was the case with my own runs. Though, once you get it, these bosses can be dispatched in fairly short order, especially when you've got a suit equipped. Suit? Equipped? So you don't start with them, but once you beat the first boss, you'll obtain the first of them. Clearing out the other labs also grants you additional suit powers, giving you 3 all up by the end of the game. Once activated, you'll find they give 2 upgrades to Nova's abilities. The first is an upgrade to your weapons, offering greater firepower and range. Not only that, but your shots will carve through multiple enemies, which can be seriously handy for crowd control purposes. The second is to Nova's movement. One suit will allow him to grab onto walls and ceilings, allowing movement over gaps both tight and large. The second gives Nova better control when underwater, with more controlled jumps. The final lets Nova take flight, giving him a bit more freedom to move about each level. The downside is that you can't just activate a suit and leave it running, as turning them on will drain your battery supply. The need to ration their use for when you really need them is a great touch here, as saving their use for those critical moments makes them feel like an actual power-up, over being just a permanent upgrade. Switching between them is handled with a press of a key, or joystick button. And speaking of controls, it's where Delta Shadow offers something quite different from many other releases on the Next. Keyboard controls are present, though are set up like more modern games with the WASD keys used for movement, and B to fire, N to jump, and M bringing your suit selection window up. These can be redefined as well, in case you're after something a bit more traditional. On the joystick front, things differ wildly, as this is one game where you can't use your classic Atari-style controller. Which means it's time to find a trusty Mega Drive pad and take advantage of it, which works incredibly well here. The A button fires, B jumps, and C brings up the suit selection screen. They work great, and if you are someone who does prefer a joystick for these kinds of games, you'll be pleasantly surprised with how well it works, especially being a more console-focused experience than other titles released on the Next so far. Back to Nova's exploration of these facilities. The second level of each facility is far more straightforward. Here it's really only about just working your way through to finding that exit. Though of course, like with the other levels, it's worth keeping an eye out for destructible walls. These typically lead to rooms which offer a plethora of handy pickups. Whilst the bosses in the first level labs can be a challenge, it's the ones at the end of the final level that you really have to get into the groove for in order to take them out. And when you do, it's time to watch Nova prime those bombs and get the heck out of Dodge to see the facility go up in cutscene form. When you've defeated the second facility, the game mixes things up a bit, as you'll now take control of Jacqueline, as she needs to lower the security in order to allow Nova to get into the third facility. This sequence is focused more on stealth, as though she's armed with a stun gun, she can't blast her way through. Instead, it's really about taking advantage of her invisibility cloak to sneak past guards and access the various terminals and elevators located in the Trigon facility in order to complete her mission. It sounds like a neat setup, and truth be told, it would be, if not for one little thing. That thing being that both her stun gun and invisibility cloak are depleted quite rapidly when used. Not only that, recharging them can both take some time. So you'll find yourself from time to time sitting in a terminal room, waiting. And waiting. And yes, waiting some more, for both your stun gun power and invisibility cloak power to refill. This, well and truly, killed the pace of the game for me here. Not because of the focus on stealth, but the combination of how large the complex is, the slow recharge rates for these abilities, but also that being killed restarts the stage completely. Now, in Nova's sections, if you get killed, it really doesn't offer too much of a penalty. Sure, you find yourself put back at the entrance to the stage, but all up, they're not really that lengthy to work your way through when you know what you're doing. Even better, if you die battling a boss, you're not even placed at the start of the stage. Rather, you'll be placed right outside the door to them for your next attempt. This really is a great move for fairness. And so, the need to restart Jacqueline's section after dying is incredibly jarring. Though, seeing the cutscene which plays once she makes it to the roof of the Trigon HQ is far more rewarding when you do actually make it up there. Which brings you back to Nova for his mission to take on the third facility. You'll find things continue to play out just as they did with the first two. in the sense that your goal remains the same, in that it's about working your way through the 3 floors, collecting the final suit upgrade from the lab on the first level, then defeating the final boss, and watching that one go sky high, just like the others. All that now stands between Nova and the final defeat of the alien forces is tackling their lair. Which also brings another change in mechanics, as this time, rather than take control of Nova once he's breached the lair, you'll start out on his motorcycle whilst en route there. When on the default normal difficulty, you'll see this sequence only once. But if you choose to play on a higher difficulty level, this sequence is one you'll see several more times through the game. The goal for it is quite straightforward. Simply make it to the end without crashing enough times to empty your health. It's really about avoiding crashing into walls on the corners, and on the straight sections, negotiating the barriers, either by steering to avoid them or using the handy jumps to leap over them. Unlike other sequences, this one is thankfully quite short, which is again a relief, as though you will be sent back to the start if you die, it gives you plenty of opportunities to memorise the layout, which helps ease the challenge of the sequence somewhat. Upon your arrival, you'll discover things are laid out slightly differently here, as Nova now needs to make his way up a level at a time, each of them offering a previous boss to battle when you get to the end. But once you've fought through and you've made it to the top floor, the final showdown is about to start, with Nova now needing to take out the head of Trigon, and the aliens behind it all. The difficulty certainly ramps up with these encounters, as, at least for my efforts, the first of them was more than enough to do me in. Which saddens me somewhat, as this encounter was one where the lack of telegraphing on the enemy's movement patterns well and truly became a sore point of frustration for me. With no safe spots or even a recognisable way to plan your movements, I truly found it a bit of a test of attrition more than anything, as, well, I could barely survive a pass without taking damage from the enemy when they were moving. But no matter. As for everything else, I really love the art style employed here, where the visuals aren't really designed around fully coloured backgrounds and sprites. If anything, it could be called an enhanced Spectrum look, and one that I feel is quite right for the Next as a platform. Animations are fluid, and there is some moody palette usage for the backgrounds across the various Trigon facilities. In particular, I really took a shine to the offices of the Trigon HQ, which Jacqueline needs to negotiate. They were a shining example of the Next's capabilities in action. So while the visuals are great for the most part, there is one area where they're not so impressive: the bike sections. I guess if these sequences were more common, then perhaps it might stick out more, but nonetheless, it certainly is a bit of a step backwards, especially compared to the design's fluidity and palette usage across the rest of the game. Now for the soundtrack. Well, in short, this one certainly slaps, as the kids would say. There is a nice set of tunes which are played across the game, and they offer plenty of atmosphere into Nova's mission. Also, they offer some good turns within Jacqueline's stealth part as well. All up, it works wonders for the game, and really uses the Next's AAA sound chip capabilities quite well. But there is one really interesting tidbit, which I am saving for last. Delta's Shadow isn't just for the Spectrum Next, but there is also a version for classic Spectrums, as well as modern Windows PCs. Now for those Spectrums, it's ones which are 128K and also support the TR-DOS disk system, which was used by many clones made in Russia. Sadly, it's not going to be something that I can run, or many will, so you're going to see some emulated footage here briefly. Though this one lacks the visual detail its Next counterpart offers, it's very impressive for what that original Spectrum hardware does. Though I got to admit, playing it on anything but a +2 or a +3 sounds like a bad idea based on the keyboards of those earlier machines. It also explains why the bike sections don't quite match up with the rest of the visuals of the next version. This section looks like it was brought over more or less intact, and so really designed around those classic Spectrum limits and doesn't really take advantage of what the next offers, at least in comparison. Which again is a bit of a letdown. It's a minor misstep in what is pretty much a game I had a heck of a lot of fun with. I really enjoyed my time with Delta Shadow. Sure, the difficulty can be a bit uneven in points, particularly with those very late stage boss battles, but I can ultimately forgive it as, truth be told, it's the kind of experience which isn't all that common on microcomputers, making it more than welcome in my book for what different things it brings to the table. If you've got a craving for some console-style action on your next, or perhaps are just interested in seeing more expansive experiences, then Delta Shadow is one you will certainly get a lot of joy out of.